Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Easy, Roll Good. Today we're going to actually talk about Treantmonk's recent video for the Ranger damage in 2024. He did a video earlier this week for a two-weapon fighting version of the Ranger using Hunter's Mark or whatever he wanted to use. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. But before I get started with that, I do real quick want to say, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, and if you're new here or you're just a returning viewer, please consider hitting that subscribe button, especially if you like what you see throughout this video. That's all I'm going to say on that for now. But let's talk about the Ranger real quick. So in his video, what he did is he did 3 builds, all with 2-weapon fighting Rangers. One was just a base regular Ranger, no subclass, just using Hunter's Mark. And then he did a regular, subclassless Ranger using Summon Fae instead of Hunter's Mark whenever they could. And then he finished off with a Fae Wanderer Ranger using Summon Fae because they can do so without concentration after a certain level, and to see what that looks like. And so we'll take a look at what that looks like in a second. So again, I'm going to add my own thing on top of that. Again, I know he's going for a ranged Ranger next week. I'm not going to be doing that on this one. I'm going to make some different assumptions here, but I kind of want to build upon that, provide some more data. I'll link to his video down in the description below and give him a mention. So hopefully he sees this as well and can add my data to his data and see what that looks like and make some adjustments if he wants to. But also, speaking of Treantmonk, I know he's almost at 100,000 subscribers. So if for whatever reason you've heard of me but you haven't heard of him, please go check out his channel because he does a lot of very cool stuff. He's been around for quite a long time in the community. So go check out his channel, subscribe if you can, or if you want to, get him to that 100K. He's definitely earned it for sure. And you'll notice also that my format is very similar to his in this particular video. I'm not using my normal format. I'm using a lot of the same colors that I normally use. But I want things to be easier to compare between our two videos because his video inspired me. So I just want to kind of make a lot of the same assumptions, make the formats very similar, just so it's easier to compare kind of side by side. So let's get started. Let's pull this out of the way. Let's pull up my browser. So again, looking very similar to the way Treantmonk laid his out. Class is a Ranger. Our race is undefined, of course. Subclass undefined. We're not using a subclass at any point during this video. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We're just technically choosing the soldier background because we wanted to take a strength bonus and a dex bonus. It technically gives us savage attacker, but we're going to ignore that because Treantmonk also ignored background. So I want that to be more of an even comparison, even though savage attacker basically adds nothing. And then for the fighting style, we're going to be choosing great weapon fighting because we're going to be using a polearm. We're going to be a strength-based Ranger. Our level 1 stats are strength 17, dex 14 because we need to be using medium armor because we can't use heavy armor as a base Ranger. Con of 14, wisdom 13, just the minimum wisdom needed if for whatever reason we wanted to multi-class. For our ASIs or feats, at level 4 we'll take polearm master. At level 8 we'll take great weapon master. At level 12 we'll take a +1 to strength and +1 to wisdom. At level 16, we'll take a +2 to wisdom. And then level 19, we'll take the epic boon of irresistible offense, purely because that's also what Treantmonk did. So again, I want things to be as similar as possible and just make my own adjustments where I thought it was necessary to do what I wanted to do. So that means our final stats will be a strength of 21, dex of 14, con of 14, and a wisdom of 16. So we're going to make a lot of the same assumptions because, again, I want to make these comparisons as equal as possible. So it's going to be 4 combats per long rest. I'm assuming 4 rounds each. That seemed to be consistent with the way that he was doing his math. But I do like the framework of 4 combats per long rest, and I'll get into this a bit later because we're going to start using spells in the second half of this video. And I think the idea of building the framework of where it's 4 combats per long rest, because usually when I think of like damage calculations, I'm assuming like my World of Warcraft brain rot of just hitting a target dummy. But if we assume 4 combats, then we can kind of make assumptions about those combats because if it's 4 separate combats, and I can see like, okay, there's going to be combats with more than one target or even multiple targets because that's pretty regular within the game of D&D. So then we can start thinking about how we apply AoE spells, and again, we'll get into that much later. There's going to be 1 short rest. That doesn't matter for the Ranger. There's no outside source of advantage or disadvantage. We can always cast or place Hunter's Mark. Concentration never falls. This is an assumption that Treantmonk mentioned in his video. He didn't actually write it on his document, but he did say it in the video. So we're just going to make the same assumption. We use about half of our spell slots to improve damage, although for the first calculation, we're not going to do that for a particular reason I'll get to in a second. Magic weapon, the spell will not be used because you just assume that you get a magic weapon at some point. The Vex math, again, we're copying that directly from Treantmonk because we're starting off basically the same way he does with 2-weapon fighting for the first 3 levels. But beyond the first 3 levels, we're not worrying about Vex at all, so we don't care about that after that. And then for the spells to increase damage for Rangers, again, directly from his video, he had Hunter's Mark. Level 1 had Hail of Thorns, which is ranged only. Level 2 has Cordon of Arrows, which he said is too many assumptions, but I also think it's just too slow. Level 2 also has Summon Beast, which is concentration. Conjure Barrage is an AoE at level 3. Lightning Arrow at level 3 is ranged only. Summon Phase, concentration. Grasping Vine, concentration. Conjure Woodland Beings is concentration and AoE. Steal and Strike is multi-target, and then Conjure Volley at 5th level also is AoE. For Treantmonk's video specifically, he did focus only on Hunter's Mark. I think that's pretty fair because he's basically just taking the player's handbook and playing it as, you know, Wizards of the Coast seem to intend by focusing so much on Hunter's Mark. He's like, okay, I'm just going to build a Ranger and we're just going to use Hunter's Mark and see how that goes. But I also think spells are a huge part of the Ranger's toolkit, and by not using those spells, that we're kind of misrepresenting them. I don't think Treantmonk by any means is being like disingenuous, but I think it's important that we do consider that. What he did to kind of make up for that is include the Shadow Touched feat to pick up Wrathful Smite, because that's a necromancy spell now. He did that specifically when he was doing the Summon Fae calculations for the extra damage to use those spell slots, because the melee ranger has so few damaging spells. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But for Treantmonk specifically, I think it's so funny that he didn't include the best spell that the ranger has. And because Treantmonk is known for using it, you know, infamously, which is, of course, Spike Growth. We're going to be, for this demonstration, we're going to be using Spike Growth as soon as we can and as often as possible. And we'll be using a Pike with the Push Mastery, and we're going to make the following additional assumptions on top of that. So we're going to be using dual wielding at level 1 without the 2-weapon fighting style, because it's still better than using a polearm. We'll hard switch to polearm at level 4 once we have polearm master. We'll cast Spike Growth if possible round 1. No other actions, including a reaction, will be taken on this turn. There's always one target to push 10 feet into Spike Growth during both our turn and as a reaction from polearm master. An additional 4d4 damage from Spike Growth will be added just from enemies, you know, having to walk out of it or take some damage from it from one way or another, you know, allies pushing them into it or out of it, because technically that is our contribution of damage, because Spike Growth wouldn't be there without us. Only 4d4 Spike Growth damage will be counted on any round that we don't attack, such as casting another spell as an action. This accounts for pushing back as a reaction or just enemies being moved in and out of it. Just some value of Spike Growth will always occur on a round, even if we're not able to get attacks in. If Spike Growth is unavailable, we use Hunter's Mark until we have enough uses of Spike Growth to remove the use of Hunter's Mark. And finally, the Hue, the bonus action attack from Great Weapon Master, will only be calculated on a critical hit. Some admissions here, some things I want to kind of point out to be just fair. The values probably overvalue Hunter's Mark a little bit, because we're not accounting for losing bonus action attacks to move it, because we do have our Polearm Master bonus action attack. We're only going to cast it once per combat. However, you could consider Hunter's Mark turns or Hunter's Mark combats as pure single target. Push only works against large or smaller creatures, so technically this strategy has very limited scope. You know, if you're leveling 1 to 20 as a ranger, not all of your fights are going to be against, large or smaller creatures. These numbers also possibly overvalue the damage from Spike Growth. You could assume that the overages could come from party members moving enemies through it and out of it, because we know how much damage Spike Growth can do with an organized party. Not even assuming a grappled death squad, but assuming just everyone has a push mastery or some way to move enemies through Spike Growth, you can get a lot of damage out of it. The numbers also probably overvalue the reaction attack from Polearm Master, because I'm just setting that at 100%. But this is much easier to subtract post calculation. You can just easily say, okay, I'm going to take half of the value of the reaction from Polearm Master and subtract that from the total. We'll talk about it at the very, very end of the video, but we're not going to worry too much about it until then. These numbers undervalue the Hue attack from Great Weapon Master, because again, we're not considering dropping enemies to 0 and getting a full bonus action attack off of it. There's extra value to be added there as well that we're not actually considering. So we're going to go through our first table, and in this table, we're only worrying about Hunter's Mark and Spike Growth. Those and Nature's Veil comes online later on. We're going to go through this one pretty quick because the results are actually pretty middling. We'll take a look at the charts later, but we'll take a quick look through this one. So again, we're starting exactly the same as Treantmonk did in his video with dual wielding. So we start off at 12.1. We have great weapon fighting at level 2, so we don't have 2-weapon fighting, so we actually fall behind here. Level 4, we pick up Polearm Master for +4 to strength as well. We get up to a DPR of 20.6, basically 20.7. We get extra attack, and we can start using Spike Growth at level 5. There's some push math here that we're calculating to be pushed at least once per turn, multiplied by the number of attack rounds that we get, which is 75%. So that is all calculated in here. You can see that under the Spike Growth reaction damage. Calculating all that in, scrolling down, this goes up to, and then we have our Hunter's Mark turns as well. So we go up to 34.3859. Half the time we're using Hunter's Mark, half the time we're using Spike Growth. We plateau again at level 6. At level 7, we're using Spike Growth 3 times a day and Hunter's Mark 1 time per day, so we just adjust the totals. We go up to 36.85. We get Great Weapon Master at level 8. So we have proficiency bonus to our attacks during our action, and then we have the Great Weapon Master bonus action attack 5% of the time. So we just make the adjustments to the math for that one. Scrolling down. A lot of math needing to be done. That's a total DPR of 39.84. Pretty good. Again, we're very much over the Warlock baseline. And again, a lot of this is coming from Spike Growth. If we didn't include Spike Growth, this would be much lower. Level 9, we get proficiency bonus goes up to +4, and we're now using Spike Growth 100% of the time. So we make those adjustments, and we get up to 42.9821. We plateau for levels 10 and 11. Then at level 12, we get our ASI, so we go +1 strength, +1 wisdom. We make the adjustments accordingly. We get up to 44.7821. Level 3, proficiency bonus increases again, so we make just the small adjustments one more time, up to 45.6821. Level 14, we get Nature's Veil, so we're just adding the average damage increase of attacking with advantage over attacking without advantage and doing that math. And one thing to note here is that Treantmonk, I don't think, accounted for this in his video. Because Nature's Veil turns you invisible until the end of your next turn. So if you bonus action Nature's Veil and then make your attacks, and then the round goes through, and then it's your turn again, you can make your attacks again at advantage. And then you have 2 rounds of attacks at advantage, and he only did 1 round. So his numbers could actually have been a little bit higher. But I just wanted to point out that discrepancy as well. So we're adding that on to our DPR here. We end up with 48.3408. Same thing at level 15. Level 16, we get 1 additional use of Nature's Veil, so we're just going to add that onto the existing DPR because our attack damage hasn't changed yet, so we don't need to recalculate everything. We get a total of 49.6702. Level 17, we have a proficiency bonus +1. That's all we get at level 17 using this strategy. So Spike Growth, continuing through that, we end up with, again, recalculating everything. We end up with a total DPR of 50.7502. Level 18, same thing. Level 19, we get the epic boon of Irresistible Offense. We get 21 Strength. We get to add that to our criticals. So then, again, we just recalculate everything one more time. We end up with, where is it at? A DPR, final DPR, because again, nothing changes at level 20. We end up with a final DPR of 53.5064. So that's not too bad, but let's see what that looks like. So I basically copied the chart from Treantmonk because I want to compare it to what he had. So the bottom line here, the dark blue line is the Warlock baseline. The red line is sort of a Ranger baseline. That's his Ranger only using Hunter's Mark, no subclass, no nothing else, 2-weapon fighting. The brownish orangish line here is his 2-weapon fighting Fey Wanderer using the Summon Fey spell. That was best performing build. And then the green line is the Shadow Monk that he used as a comparison for something that's doing pretty good damage as far as martial classes go, to compare it to as well. So where does this build using just Spike Growth as a base Ranger with no subclass fit on it? It fits in like this. So the light blue line is the build that we just discussed. So we can see levels 1 through 4, it's kind of jockeying for position. It's less at sometimes, better at others, especially once we get Polearm Master, that boosts our damage quite a bit. And then once we turn on Spike Growth at level 5, that jumps us up quite a bit. We're up here almost on par with actually technically a little higher than the Shadow Monk. And again, you might be thinking I'm overvaluing Spike Growth. It really depends on how well your party is built around it. I think you could always get more damage out of Spike Growth than I'm assuming, but you could also very much assume less. If your concentration gets disrupted, then of course it's going to plummet, of course, the contribution from that. But just assuming that it doesn't drop and you kind of get, regular value out of it, I think this is a pretty fair assumption. So we can see we can kind of keep pace with the Shadow Monk. We drop below it at level 10 because monks just go crazy at level 10 with their level 10 base monk feature. And then we keep going up, Nothing really changes throughout it. It's pretty solid baseline because we don't really have any good features. And all we're doing is using Spike Growth and hitting things with the polearm. So the only damage increases we're really getting are from proficiency bonus increase, from strength increases, and from Nature's Veil, the few uses of Nature's Veil that we get every day. And that's it. So nothing really crazy. We end up even below the Fey Wanderer Ranger. We're actually doing pretty well up until that last bit, but that last bit is that level 17. They start using Hunter's Mark in addition to Summon Fey, and they have permanent advantage on all their attacks. So that's why you see the big spike there at the end, and that's why they pull ahead, and then we fall behind. So that's pretty fine. Let's go ahead and get rid of that here. We're gonna go on. We're gonna actually go a little more nuts. We're gonna make more assumptions. And it's going to kind of go down a rabbit hole because I had to redo the second one like 3 times because I kept discovering different things I could do and kind of building off it at different levels. So real quick, let's talk about more assumptions that we're making after our first demonstration here. So now, once we're able, we will cast non-concentration damaging spells such as Conjure Barrage, while also adhering to the 1/2 spell slots for damage assumption. When accounting for AoE or multi-target spells, we're only going to assume minimum number of targets necessary to do noticeably higher damage than the attacks and bonus action attacks we'll lose by casting by it. Noticeably is very, I don't have like a specific like 10% or anything. I didn't do anything like that. But if it's like, if it was within like, you know, like 4 damage or 5 damage, I didn't include it. I just figured calculations to make it noticeably higher, I guess, in my opinion. So it's very subjective. However, once we do set a number of targets for that spell, we won't adjust it later once our damage goes up. So we may get to a point where casting a spell becomes inefficient, so we just attack instead. Additionally, if running Hunter's Mark, we will assume the marked enemy dies whenever we take turns to cast a spell instead of attack, which will allow us to move it as a bonus action without sacrificing the damage from making an attack as a bonus action with Polar Master, so that kind of fills in that hole there. Because this build has to run with lower wisdom, we're going to also assume that at least 2/3 of the enemies hit by spell make the saving throw. And basically what this is going to be for Conjure Barrage specifically, I said 4 targets, 3 of them making the saving throw and only 1 of them failing. So 75% is basically what I'm assuming on that. And then for damage from such spells and extra features such as Conjure Barrage and other AoE effects, again, much like the Nature's Veil, we're just calculating the damage, the average increase in damage over just making the attacks instead, and then dividing that by the number of rounds of combat throughout the day, which is 16. So getting started here. Starting at level 1, nothing changes. Nothing actually changes until level 9, which is when we get our other spell slots. So everything's the same. You know, we had 20 DPR at level 4, adding spike growth to 39 or 34.38 at level 5. Same thing at level 6, goes up a little bit at level 7. Level 8, Great Weapon Master comes online. And then moving on to level 9, we can get down there. So level 9, again, our proficiency bonus goes up to +4. That's fine. We now have spike growth 4 times per long rest, so we're not using Hunter's Mark anymore at this time. We have 9 total spells. We're only spending 4 of those on spike growth, so we can use maybe another one for our damage. So we're going to cast 1 Conjure Barrage against 4 enemies, and again, only 1 of them fails the saving throw. So all of the other math is the same. We're going to get down to the Conjure Barrage here in a second, so you can see the average Conjure Barrage damage with 3 succeeding on the saving throw and 1 failing is 56.25, minus the average damage of just attacking that round with our action and bonus action, divided by the number of rounds over the day, is a total DPR increase throughout the day of 1.175, bringing our DPR up to 44.1571. Not that big of an increase, and again, I think that's why it's pretty fair to calculate spells in, because it's not that big of a deal. I think I'm even being a little conservative with the way that I'm calculating these spells, but again, I don't want to make too many assumptions about how many targets there can be or could be, because you can obviously just go crazy with it. So continuing on, at level 10, nothing changes. Level 11, we have 10 spell slots, but we're already using 5 spell slots. We're not going to add any additional Conjure Barrages. At level 12, we get just a +1 to another stat. We get +1 to strength and +1 to wisdom. We're still using everything as normal. We go up to 45.5768. Level 13. So level 13 is where I had another sort of a paradigm shift. So at level 13, we have 11 spell slots, and we also have access to level 4 spell slots at this time. So then I actually had to look at level 4 spells and see what is worth casting, and I ended up on Guardian of Nature. So Guardian of Nature is worth casting over spike growth based on the calculations that I'm using. So we're going to use 3 spike growths throughout the day. We're going to use 1 Guardian of Nature throughout the day. That's 4 total spells. So we're going to use 2 Conjure Barrages against 4 enemies still. Those will happen during our spike growth rounds, our spike growth combats. But yeah, we're going to have the split between 3 spike growth combats and 1 Guardian of Nature combat, and calculate that accordingly. And what Guardian of Nature does, so you don't have to look it up, for strength-based rangers, what it does is it's a bonus action to activate. So we technically get 1 less bonus action each combat that we do that, but it gives you advantage on all strength-based attack rolls, and it gives you additional 1d6 damage on all weapon attacks. So it's kind of like Hunter's Mark in that way. It also gives you a bunch of dark vision and increased movement speed by 10 feet. But mainly we're just using it for the advantage, of course, and the extra damage, sort of like a Hunter's Mark, like a level 4 Hunter's Mark, essentially. We have the Guardian of Nature math here. We end up with a DPR just from Guardian of Nature of 57.077, but we're only using that once a day. Then we get all of our spike growth math, adding on the Conjure Barrages, we end up with a spike growth DPR of 47.1214. Again, Guardian Nature once per day, so 25% of the time. Spike growth 75% of the time, a total DPR of 49.6103. Pretty good. And then at level 14, we get Nature's Veil. We get this twice per long rest. So again, this counts for 2 rounds of combat. That gives me advantage. Again, we're going to be using this during our spike growth rounds because we're still using spike growth quite a bit. Again, we're just going to add that on. We end up with a total DPR of 51.6268. Moving down to level 15, we now have 12 total spell slots. We now have 2 level 4 spell slots. We get 2 Guardians of Nature, 2 spike growths, and we're going to use 3 Conjure Barrages versus 4 targets. This brings us to a total DPR. Again, the only thing that's changing is that we're casting 1 more Conjure Barrage, and we're now using Guardian of Nature 50% of the time versus spike growth 50% of the time, bringing us to a total of 53.8034. Level 16, we get +1 use of Nature's Veil, so we can just add that right on. To the spike growth DPR specifically, we recalculate it, 56.1124. At level 17 is when I had another paradigm shift, and I had to recalculate everything again. Again, this took me so long to do. But what we're doing here at level 17, a number of things change. You know, I'm going to cover this up real quick because there's a lot of stuff that I need to read. Where's that thing? Let's move this around. So I don't want to spoil anything just yet. We're going to stretch this. Okay. So let's read the level 17. We get proficiency bonus +1, of course, but a number of things happen at level 17. 1, we get our first 5th level spell slot. 2, Hunter's Mark grants advantage on all attacks against marked targets. Hunter's Mark is giving us similar benefits to Guardian of Nature, but it also can't be your concentration can't be broken by damage because of an earlier Hunter because of an earlier Ranger feature. So it is more reliable than Guardians of Nature as well. We have enough free uses of a Hunter's Mark that we never need to use spell slots on it, which means that we now have all of these spell slots to use just on spells that do damage. All 7 of our damage increasing spell slots can go to bigger spells. For this reason, we're actually going to make a hard switch to Hunter's Mark instead of Guardian of Nature. We're not going to be using spike growth at all. We're just using Hunter's Mark at this time. We're going to switch to a Glaive Mastery to use Raise, so even if we miss, we still do 5 damage because that's our strength bonus. At this level, we'll be also using a 1 Steel Wind Strike because we have 5th level spell slots against 3 targets. The spell allots for up to 5 targets, so we're actually kind of undervaluing the possible damage there. And then the cool thing about Hunter's Mark over Guardians of Nature is that though Guardians of Nature does give you advantage on all attack rolls against everything around you, not a specific target, it is only strength-based attack rolls, and the extra damage from it only applies to weapon attacks, not like spell attacks or anything else. So for the purposes of Steel Wind Strike, we will actually have advantage against that target for Steel Wind Strike, against the marked target, because the Precise Hunter feature just gives you advantage on all of your attacks while you have Hunter's Mark active against that target. And then the damage from Hunter's Mark also applies to any attack done by the Ranger against that target, not just weapon attack. So we'll be able to add that advantage and that bonus damage from Hunter's Mark to the marked target during Steel Wind Strike. The base hit chance for Steel Wind Strike, because our Wisdom is only 16, we'll just assume that it's 50%, 75% at advantage. We'll be doing level 4 Barrage 3 times per long rest against 4 targets with 1 failure. And then level 3 Barrage 3 times per long rest against 4 targets with 1 failure. And then again, we're assuming when the marked target dies, that we can move our bonus action Hunter's Mark at that time, so it doesn't conflict with our damage, so we kind of fill in that gap. And again, we're not using Nature's Veil anymore because we already have permanent advantage. So let's scroll up to the top here again and see what we have. So level 17, move this cover. So again, we're using a Glaive for the Graze Mastery. So again, we just kind of do all the same calculations. Again, we get down to Steel Wind Strike. We see that we have, regular hit chance and then advantage hit chance. So regular hit chance against 2 of the targets, advantage against the marked target. That is a total increase of 1.3598 over the total adventuring day. A level 4 Conjure Barrage against 4 targets 3 times a day with only 1 failure each time. That's 2.809 throughout the adventuring day. Level 3 Conjure Barrage against 4 targets 3 times a day with only 1 failure, 6.996 throughout the adventuring day, for a total DPR of 68.5854, which is a very significant increase from where we were before at 56.1124. So that is very interesting to see that we just switched to having permanent advantage and just using these big burst AoE spells. And even then, they're only accounting for, like, our attack DPR here is 63.717, right? And then, there's 1.3, basically 1.4 from Steel Wind Strike throughout the day, 2.8. So that's basically like you can say 5 DPR from that, and then maybe 5.7 to 6 DPR total from the spells throughout the adventuring day. Just the Hunter's Mark having advantage, and basically we're getting carried by Great Weapon Master and Polearm Master is what we're getting carried by, to be honest. But still, it's very interesting to see just how much that increases our total DPR. All right, so moving on to level 18, nothing changes because, again, there's nothing gained at level 18. Level 19, we get the Buna's Irresistible Offense. Recalculate everything. We have a total DPR now of 75.6155 just for having big bonus damage on crits, plus we have permanent advantage, so we have a higher crit chance based on that. That's pretty significant. You know, we broke the 70 mark. And then finally at level 20, since we're using Hunter's Mark now, we actually get the bonus from the capstone of Hunter's Mark doing a D10 instead of a D6. Notably, level 3 Conjure Barrage is now inefficient at 4 targets with only 1 failing. And like I said, we're not going to make any adjustments based on that. We're just going to say that, okay, it's inefficient now, so we're not going to cast it anymore. And we're a melee-based ranger, so we don't have any other real spells to cast for a melee ranger that are worth casting in place of our attack. So we're just going to stop casting that. We just now have 3 level 3 spell slots to do other things with. And then I think the biggest assumption that we're making at this point is the 100% uptime on our reaction. But let's real quick look at the final calculation for level 20, and we end up with 79.5043, basically just shy, 79.5 basically is what we're working with, just shy of the 80 mark. And again, we're being generous with the reaction, saying 100% uptime. We can see that the reaction is at 18 damage. That's its contribution to DPR. So we just say 50%, that's 9. So we're doing 70% total DPR throughout the day. That's still very respectable. So what does that look like on Treantmonk's charts here? So we'll bring up the original one again. These are all of his builds. This is the Warlock baseline that a lot of people use. The red line is sort of the Ranger baseline, where it's just the base Ranger just using Hunter's Mark and 2-weapon fighting, nothing else. The orangish brown line is the 2-weapon fighting Fey Wanderer using Summon Fey when they can. That was Treantmonk's best build during that video. I'm sure he could come up with something better, but that was the best one in that video. And then the green line is, of course, the Shadow Monk that he used to compare just to see how far down that his Ranger builds were compared to the Shadow Monk, which isn't even the best performing martial build, but it was just a point of comparison. So where does this weird Ranger this weird sort of, you know, starting off at 2-weapon fighting, then moving to Polearm Master, then incorporating Spike Growth, and then switching to, you know, Guardians of Nature slowly, and then finally switching to just using Hunter's Mark and a bunch of burst spells. Where does this Ranger land based on all the assumptions that we've made throughout this whole exercise? Hello everyone, Future Gerg here. I didn't actually realize that Treantmonk also releases twice a week, so we already actually have the Archer Ranger video. I probably should have just waited for that one. But we have the data for that one, so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to put this information up on the screen over the current video that's being paused right now. So looking at what we have here, this is all the data from Treantmonk's 2 videos on the Ranger this week. We have the bottom line here, which is the Warlock baseline. The red line that goes across here, the bright red line, that is sort of the base Ranger baseline. That is just a 2-weapon fighting Ranger with Hunter's Mark. The green line, the bright green line, is the Shadow Monk, which he was using as a comparison in the melee video. In the ranged video specifically, he does use a rogue using a crossbow. I'm going to ignore that one just for this purpose, but I just want to have the Shadow Monk here as a comparison. And then the dark kind of blackish, I think it's like a dark blue line here, is his longbow Ranger with using the Beastmaster subclass, and then the Fey Wanderer is the sort of orangish brown, light brown line going up as well. So what we can see just based on his the data that he had, if we were just comparing builds to builds, because he only compared ranged builds to ranged builds and melee builds to melee builds, which is fair, but I think it's kind of nice to look at how things compare to each other, is that for the longbow with the Beastmaster, it's behind the Fey Wanderer with Summon Fey in tiers 1 and 2. It kind of goes in lockstep during tier 3, and then the Fey Wanderer starts pulling ahead again, but just barely in tier 4. But again, as we saw in his videos, and again, I'll link both of his videos down in the description below, so you can go check that out. And again, if you haven't subscribed to him already, go ahead and check him out after this video, and go and give him a subscription. He's almost at 100,000. We can push him there. But yeah, we see that the Ranger's pretty lackluster, at least based on the builds that he was using, and for his Beastmaster, he was using the Beast of the Air because it made the most sense. He had pretty sound reasoning for it. But even if you used the Beast of the Land, I don't think there would be that significant, even if you assumed that it lived the whole time. But let's go ahead and throw up the stats from the Ranger that I used on this one, where I used Spike Growth and Hunter's Mark and all these different things. Kind of just played a Ranger like I think I would play a Ranger if I was playing a strength-based polearm Ranger. Then the graph looks like this. And so we can see that this Spike Growth Ranger that kind of drops Spike Growth at the end is performing quite well. And again, we did assume the 100% uptime on the reaction attack from Polearm Master, which isn't necessarily true. So you can probably drop that purple line just down a little bit lower after level 4. It wouldn't make a huge difference. It would probably put it slightly below the Shadow Monk, most of tier 2 and tier 3, and then at the end of level 20, it'd be just below the Shadow Monk barely. But I think overall, as long as you're getting decent value out of Spike Growth, you're still performing better than all the other Ranger builds that he presented. I think he's being very conservative by only assuming single target, because Spike Growth can be a single target spell. And again, we are assuming that we are able to push the target with the push mastery, which doesn't work in every fight, which is worth considering as well. But I just think this is a good illustration that as long as you just use the good spells, I'm not saying that he's using bad spells purposely or anything like that, but you know, the Ranger toolkit, and he even kind of pointed this out in his video, it is sort of tilted towards area of effect damage. A lot of their spells do area of effect damage. But I think if you kind of open yourself up to that and kind of even make even conservative assumptions, you can kind of see some greater benefit off of that maybe you aren't getting from just assuming single target. Especially again with that framework of the four combat adventuring day. So, but let me know what you think about this one down in those comments. And I'm going to link his video. I'm going to link his 2 Up and Fighting video down in the comments, so you can take a look at that one. I'll mention him as well, so hopefully he sees this video and he can add my numbers to his calculations and compare and contrast that way and see how things all pan out, and maybe correct any wild assumptions that he thinks I made, because maybe I went too crazy. But I think you need to be able to use Ranger spells the way that you think that you might use them, and I really think that his framework of 4 combats per long rest allows you to kind of imagine what those combats would look like, and you can be like, I would have 4 targets, several times per day. That's not unusual if we think about how we play D&D. Overall, again, let me know what you think down in those comments. And again, while you're going down to those comments, please hit that like button. If you liked what you saw in this video today, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Again, go check out Treantmonk's video that this was based on, and see what he had to say about his 2 Up and Fighting builds. And also, again, if you for some reason you discovered me before him, please subscribe to his channel so he can hit that 100K mark. That'd be really great. We have the spellcasting base class changes coming up this Wednesday, so you have that to look forward to as well. I've been enjoying a lot of the comments you guys have been leaving on the martial base class and martial subclass changes in my last few weeks' videos. That's been really cool to find out some things that maybe I missed, or some cool build ideas that you guys have been kind of bouncing off. So really good stuff coming. I appreciate all your guys' time, and I'll see you in the next one.